welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Now, we are in a race against time. The reactionary Republicans are seeking to team up with Obama, the Wall Street Democrat, with all of his treachery, and they're attempting a dirty deal at the expense of our economic rights. They want to attack the New Deal and Great Society entitlements in the name of deficit reduction. The austerity ghouls are attempting to make a comeback. Now, at the same time, and this is the hopeful side of the news, we've got a tremendous increase in interest and support for the Wall Street sales tax. This has been one of the best weeks for the Wall Street sales tax in a good long time. But the problem is that the austerity ghouls are moving very fast. And Obama, in particular, has broken out of his White House cocoon, and he's now attempting a charm offensive in order to get this sellout going. Let's just look at the situation right now. This past Wednesday, we had Obama in a shift. Previously, for the last several weeks since the State of the Union, Obama had been doing his campaign routine, right? His staged events outside of Washington with a backdrop of human props who applauded his very vapid lines. Now he is heavily engaged meeting with reactionary Republicans. One turning point in particular was the dinner on Wednesday night with the 12 tyrants. And let's see if we can get you the 12 tyrants. He called Lindsey Graham, the liberal reactionary Republican. He's on the wrong side of every issue. He went around Boehner and Cantor and the rest of that gang, and he went to the Senate, and he found the following. With the help of McCain and Lindsey Graham, he got, let's see, McCain of Arizona, Coburn, Coburn looks like he's in a midlife crisis, growing a beard, of Oklahoma, Johans of Nebraska, I think, Hoeven of North Dakota. We've got, in particular, coming from the Three Amigos, right? Of the Three Amigos, we've got Lindsey Graham and McCain. The new amiga who has taken the place of Lieberman in the Three Amigos is this, some people say Miss Prim, some people say the blue stocking, Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire, a New England reactionary. Ron Johnson, senator from the John Birch Society up there in Wisconsin. Toomey the Toomer, Patrick J. Toomey from the Club of Growths, Pennsylvania. Bob Corker, reactionary from Tennessee. Dan Coates, representative of that awful Indiana Republican machine that brought you Dan Quayle. Richard Burr of North Carolina. It's not known whether he's a direct lineal descendant of Aaron Burr, the arch traitor, but he may be. Saxby Chambliss of Georgia. Remember him, the scoundrel who drove Max Cleland out of office by saying he wasn't patriotic, even though he had two legs and an arm on the Vietnam battlefield, and Saxby had declined to do any of this stuff. So a complete hypocrite in his own warmonger terms. Those are your 12 tyrants. So that was the dinner at the Jefferson Hotel on Wednesday night. We're also told that Obama is now in speed dial mode. He has been making calls to Senator Bob Portman, a number cruncher, right, from Ohio. There used to be the OMB director from Mad Dog Bush the Younger. Susan Collins, liberal Republican of Maine. And first a phone call to House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan, another John Birch Society entry, and then on Thursday, a lunch by Obama with Paul Ryan. And in these meetings, we are accurately informed by the Washington Post, Obama is offering the following taken out of your hide, your economic rights, your future, your survival on the table by Obama in all of his unspeakable treachery, attempting to appease these raving reactionaries and proto-fascists. A lot of them are from the Tea Party, as we've just heard, right? Certainly out of this, certainly Toomey, Johnson, and some others would count as being the Republican extremist Tea Party. Obama's offering an extra $500 billion in Medicare cuts. Now, this is actually a step in the wrong direction. You'll remember that in Obama's State of the Union, he said that he would be glad to come up with Medicare cuts that would meet the requirements of the despicable Simpson-Bowles cat food kill granny commission. That would be more like $400 billion. So now Obama has gone beyond Simpson-Bowles with $500 billion of cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, child health, other health, federal government health programs across the board. $500 billion over the next 10 years, worse than Simpson-Bowles. See, he's back in that mode where he negotiates with himself, that he makes offers, and if they're not accepted, he makes an even worse offer from the point of view of the people. And he is holding fast to the chained CPI, the chained Consumer Price Index, which would, a la longue, would undermine, destroy, gut the Social Security benefit. So this is the treacherous Obama. This is the Wall Street puppet. This is dissembling deception, deceit, trickery, and so forth, which we came to know in the first term. And he's now drifted back into that mode, which, of course, is his default position. His most congenial method of operations is deception and treachery. The House Progressive Caucus, as of February 15th, passed a resolution telling Obama that there should be no cuts. There must be no cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. But these people are feckless. They will not fight Obama's pretty face, Obama's personal magnetism, Obama's magic smile. This is too much for these wretched weaklings in the House Progressive Caucus. They've got to grow some backbone before they can stand up to Obama. So don't hold your breath for anything coming from that point of view. Notice also Obama has called off his campaign events. The lunch with Ryan is especially ominous because here's what's going to happen next. It's all choreographed. We're going to get Ryan coming out next week with his Republican reactionary budget, but this time toning down some of his tax cuts for the rich, keeping a lot of his genocidal budget cuts, his killer cuts, perhaps packaging them in a somewhat more conciliatory format. And he says he wants to balance the budget within 10 years. Now, the word from the Washington Post is inside the Beltway, when the Republicans say they want to go for a balanced budget and it looks halfway plausible, Obama will cave. Obama will cave. Obama Treachery Alert is the leading item of this week. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to our second segment here. It's the 8th of March 2013, and we're looking at new treachery coming from Obama. The dynamic is something like this. Concerning the fiscal cliff, it's thought here in the Capitol that Obama won the fiscal cliff in the sense that he forced the reactionary Republicans to do a token tax increase on their legions of greed base. And remember that what happened with that nominal income tax rate was largely a dog and pony show, because much more important for the legions of greed are the estate tax, so they can pass on their ill-gotten loot to the next generation of nepotists and parasites, and, of course, the capital gains tax. Remember, the goal was to get capital gains and carried interest, right? The emoluments of the hedge fund hyenas, all of that taxed at the same level as ordinary income. Why should people who do rip-offs in Wall Street get a better tax rate than people who go out and sweat and work and slave to get their money? Why should there be a differential in favor of the hedge fund hyena or the zombie banker? That was all wrong. And remember, the increase on the capital gains tax was a nominal 5%, perhaps with a couple of more percent if you're super rich to pay for Obamacare. That's basically a sellout. So it's thought that that Obama, at least in terms of public opinion, won the fiscal cliff. We've now had the sequester, and that's thought to be a Republican victory, the way it goes. So now it's Obama won, reactionary Republicans won, right? Wall Street Democrats, Obama in particular, won, reactionary Republicans won. Now it's time, they say, for a compromise. We know what that means. We don't want compromises. Compromises are when Obama caves to these reactionaries. And again, he's talking $500 billion worth of cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, S-CHIP, veterans benefits through the VA, and all of that. $500 billion on top of the $700 billion that he's already cut out of Medicare. We've now got reports that people in various places, especially Texas, places like this, are having a hard time finding doctors who will take Medicare. Part of it is for the last several years, 15 years practically, we've had this crazy formula that comes into play so that Congress has to pass a doc fix every year, right? They're always on the verge of draconian killer cuts in the paybacks to the people who provide the Medicare services. And if one year that doesn't go through, people who have committed themselves to Medicare are going to be bankrupt. So there's always that. We're always on the verge of the collapse of Medicare. The doc fix for this year has been passed. But Obama, essentially, his verbal posture is that he's only gouging the providers. He's gouging the doctors, the hospitals, the labs, the technicians, and everybody else. There is a limit to what you can do with that. So he wants to take that from $700 billion over 10 years to $1,200 billion, so $1.2 trillion. And again, this is worse than Simpson-Bowles now. This goes beyond Simpson-Bowles by my calculation. So Obama is now worse than the classic austerity ghouls, the Morgan Stanley zombie banker Bowles, and the misanthrope, hater of humanity, Nuremberg candidate Al Simpson. And Obama's offering them the chained CPI, the chained consumer price index, which will gouge a whole series of federal benefits, not just Social Security, but veterans benefits and other things. This is the classical let it wither on the vine, because it's an implacable, relentless series of cuts. So this has got to be stopped. And I call on the Progressive Caucus, get some gumption, people. These are impeachable offenses, if anything is. So let's take the gloves off. The only way to deal with Obama is to bash him mercilessly, and he's drifting back. It looks like we're getting to the end of a cycle. We'll remember that after Obama's bad experience in August 2011 with the Satan sandwich and the humiliation that he was forced into by Republicans who were eager to bankrupt the United States with a default, because of Obama's cowardice, his weakness, his craven refusal to invoke the 14th Amendment and shut those reactionaries and proto-fascists down, he became their punching bag, their palooka. He then had the Osawatomie, Kansas speech where he took a verbal radical turn, a little bit of a left turn, I guess, mainly an escalation in rhetoric, nothing more, and never gave up on the grand bargain and killer cuts and genocidal austerity. It looks to me like he's now veering back after the Osawatomie year and a half. He's now back to the old Obama of unilateral concessions, preventive surrender, all of it with the fakery going on, dissembling deception, and using gun control, using gay marriage, and to some extent immigration reform to attempt to maintain left cover, even as he sells out on the most essential things. And remember, right now, the critical issues are economic. There's also issues of war and peace where he doesn't look any better. So this is where we are headed. I'm also looking, do we see any signs of Obama fighting for the minimum wage? He paid lip service to the increase of the minimum wage from the current $7.25, I believe, up to $9 an hour. That's already a pretty meager increase, right? The minimum wage needs to go to $12 an hour immediately, and then 13, 14, and 15 in the 3 following years. That would be a serious attempt to rectify the income imbalance and poverty, above all in the United States. I don't see any effort by the administration to do anything on the minimum wage. And naturally, the hypocrisy and despicable moral qualities of the Republicans are on open display. Obama, you have to look a little bit deeper, but basically the same mentality. All right. So if you don't want this, if you don't want this rather savage attack, this cooperation with Republicans, GOP, the Gehenna of plutocrats. Remember, in the Bible, Gehenna, that place in the outer darkness where there is much wailing and gnashing of teeth, the Gehenna of plutocrats, GOP, is now calling the shots. And Obama is falling all over himself. He is apparently paying the bill for these plutocrats at the Jefferson Hotel, right? Obama claims he paid for the dinner for these disgusting reactionaries, right? So that doesn't look good. The only alternative, the Wall Street sales tax, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Keep up with everything at Tarpley.net, Tarpley.net, and Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. We're going into the Papal Conclave next Tuesday, March 12th. Let's see if we get the new Pope on the Ides of March, and let's see what that looks like. It may not be good. Keep up with all of that minute by minute, hour by hour at Tarpley.net. Always new television appearances, new postings, Russia Today, Press TV, others, radio appearances, and at least one major article every week up there at Tarpley.net. Now, let's look at the other side of it. Obama's coming after you. The reactionary Republicans are coming after you, and they both agree they want to strip you of your economic rights, your New Deal reforms, century of labor struggles and so forth went into that. So now that's supposed to go out the window for the sake of Barkey's legacy. So it's all about him, right? The narcissist in chief at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So time to get tough. Now, let's look at the Wall Street sales tax. The principal event of the past 10 days is the resubmission of Harkin DeFazio in terms of actual legislation for a financial transaction tax. Now, let me preface this. It's too small. The name is wrong, but here is something moving. Let's get on this moving train, and we can rebuild it as we go. So we had a press conference with Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa. He will be retiring, but for the moment he's there. Maybe that gives him greater freedom. Sheldon Whitehouse, the blue blood from Rhode Island, Representative Peter DeFazio from Oregon. And This is now to resubmit for the new Congress that has just come in at the beginning of the year, this Wall Street trading tax, Wall Street transaction tax. It is a tax of 0.3%, 3 basis points on most stock trades by financial institutions. Bernie Sanders is also a co-sponsor of the legislation. So this is the long-awaited Bernie Sanders, and there are 19 members of the House. We'll get you that list, but there need to be more. So you got a congressman, you got 2 senators, get on them. They've got to come on board. Now, this tax, the 0.3%, is going to yield, according to their figures, $35.2 billion in revenue over the next 10 years. Now, their 3 basis points is 1/33 of what is needed. So you multiply this by 33, and you get an approximate line on the revenue, and it's something like 1.17, 1.18 trillion per year, not over 10 years. If it's 35 billion a year under their very limited tax, the full-fledged minimum Wall Street sales tax, 1%, would get you 33 times as much. So that would get you up to almost 1.2 trillion. And remember, half of that should go to the state. So this goes very, very far towards stabilizing the federal deficits and budget without the need for killer austerity. Now, the question is, DeFazio is the most forthcoming on this. He points out that Obama in 2009 was interested in a financial transaction tax. And indeed, I can add to this, Peter Orszag, unlikely as this may sound, right, a budget hawk, but somebody who wants revenue, right? So, and the obvious revenue, there's this huge stream of money, the biggest stream of money in the universe that we know of, which is not taxed. So put a tax on it. So that was Orszag, and we know this famous exchange between Orszag and Larry Summers, where Orszag says, let's have a financial transaction tax, and Summers, a hysterical geek act, how dare you, it's sacrilege, it's heresy, never in a million years, Wall Street does not pay, blah, blah, blah. So Larry Summers and Tiny Tim Geithner, the tax cheat, were absolutely opposed to the Wall Street, or in this case, the financial transaction tax, and never leaned on Obama to get this. Now, this is according to Susskind, right? Confidence men. So DeFazio celebrates that both Summers and Geithner are now gone, and he looks at Jack Lew, the Secretary of the Treasury now, or soon to be, and in written answers to the Senate during the confirmation hearings, Lew is against it. But Harkin says, in private discussions, Lew is more open. I can't put words in his mouth, but he didn't say no. It wasn't like talking to Geithner, where Geithner would be no, no, no. He was basically open to looking at it and engaging on further discussions on it. That's the difference between Geithner, who's gone, and Lew, who is now going to be in power. The tax, of course, was there from 1917 to 1966. DeFazio points out it was doubled during the Great Depression. Now, let's just look at the momentum around this. So we've now got Harkin, White House, Bernie Sanders, DeFazio, and almost 20 members of the House of Representatives. This story is written up, what I'm just telling you, is from The Nation, article by George Zornick, February 28th. We've also then got Katrina vanden Heuvel, the editrix of The Nation, and her call to pass this version of the of Wall Street sales tax appears in The Nation, her magazine, and in the Washington Post. I think it's the Washington Post online. I don't see it in the print edition of the Washington Post, but it is there. So that's Katrina vanden Heuvel. Now, there is a motion. We got a bandwagon, and this is what I think people should build on. We know that in the past couple of weeks, the Center for Effective Government has come out by name for a Wall Street sales tax, although the content is more like this lowball version, right? The 1 to 3 basis points tax. And at the same time, Dean Baker, fairly well known in the think tank circuit here in Washington, the Center for Economics and Policy, Dean Baker is for the Wall Street sales tax by name. We know Keith Ellison, the leading light of the Progressive Caucus, is for it. Now let's just look at some others who are for it. We have got, let's go with Sheila Bair. Sheila Bair, writing in Fortune magazine, no less. This is Sheila Bair, who was the head of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. We have criticized her for going along with the too big to fail policy, right, when it would have been up to her to shut down many of these banks. But she can now work for redemption. And her points, this is an article going back to the end of last year. Fortune, November 19th, 2012, just come to our attention. She's for the Wall Street sales tax. And we'll tell you the details in just a moment here on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It is once again Friday, March 8th, and we are talking the Wall Street sales tax, the bandwagon which is now growing. And again, it comes out of the fact that at the end of February, we had Harkin, White House, and DeFazio in the Capitol resubmitting the financial transaction tax. It's too small. It's got the wrong name, but it is the vehicle. It is the wedge. It's the foot in the door. It's the crack in the stone wall of the finance oligarchs. It's an idea whose time has come, as I've always said. Now let's look at Sheila Bair struggling to redeem herself after her malfeasance and nonfeasance on the issue of the too big to fail zombie banks. She has an article back here in Fortune magazine website, 4 ways Wall Street can ante up for fiscal health. And she does, interestingly, say that it's time to end the preferential treatment of capital gains and dividends. That should all be taxed at the same level as wages. Why should they get a better deal just because they're clipping coupons and not getting up and going to work in the morning? But the one that interests us most in terms of transforming the system, impose a financial transaction tax. Developed nations in Europe and elsewhere are moving forward with fees on financial transactions. Now, again, don't be fooled. It's not when you take money out of your own bank account. It's got to be when the ownership changes, when stocks, derivatives, bonds go from one owner to another. So that's one of the reasons these names are wrong. However, she's got 11 European nations are planning to assess a fee of 10 cents on every $100 transacted. Harkin wants 3 cents per $100. So the idea here is Main Street households would not be hit, but the tax would penalize those who destabilize our markets with rapid-fire trading while rewarding, or at least not punishing, those who invest for the long term. And she thinks that a 3-cent fee would raise $350 billion over 10 years. A 10-cent fee would raise about $1 trillion. And naturally, what I'm recommending, 10 times that, a 1 penny, a $1 fee, 1%, would raise 10 trillion and more over 10 years. So $1 trillion a year. We want $1 trillion a year, because with that we can stabilize the federal budget, and above all, we can rehire the workers that have been fired, especially at the state and local level. So that's Sheila Bair. Now let's look even further. Who else do we have? Let's go to Robert Reich. Robert Reich is on board. This is an influential person, right? Along with Krugman, this is one of the people, one of the few economists who can get on television whenever he wants to. Let's see if Krugman is going to go on MSNBC and talk about this Wall Street sales tax, because that's what he should do. So here's his column, Monday, March 4th. What Obama should do now. What should the president do? He says, push to repeal the sequester. You can repeal the sequester under reconciliation. You don't need to break a filibuster. As long as it's the next year's budget, you can do it with a simple majority. You can do it in the Senate with 51 votes. The Democrats, if they don't have 51 votes, they're more pathetic than I thought. So if you get the Senate to cave and just cancel the whole damn sequester, forget about it, remove it, then go ahead and isolate Boehner and the Tea Party lunatic fascists and crush them then after that. Now, that's a little bit stronger than what Reich says, but it's sort of the idea. So he then wants to have Build America's Future Act, and included in the bill would be a small tax. He's again at 0.1%. That's 10 times too small. It should be 1%, Bob, but he wants 0.1% on financial transactions. So that would be his. That's a key element of his. He has some other things, right? He wants you to cut military spending, and that can be done, but it's got to be done gradually with reconversion involved. Concerning the revenue from the 0.1% tax that he sees, half the revenue would be used for deficit reduction, the other half for investments in our future through education and so forth. So that's Robert Reich. And Katrina vanden Heuvel, as I say, in The Nation and The Washington Post, essentially reporting on Harkin DeFazio, the fact that this is going. Now, remember, we do have already the Progressive Caucus is on board. The AFL-CIO is for it. The UAW is for it. We've had articles appealing in the Daily Cost, the Huffington Post, Firedog Lake. They're all for it. And Krugman is for it. Krugman downplays the significance, which I think some of these others do also, but Krugman is for it. So here is the thing that I strongly recommend. It's time to engage economists in a dialogue. Think of economists, and it's time to talk to them about two things. The first, the leading edge, is what we've just been saying. It's time for a Wall Street sales tax. Now, the name is important. Don't call it a financial transaction tax, or John Q. Public is going to think, John and Jane Q. Public, are going to think that it means that they get nicked when they take money out of their own bank account at the ATM. No, that is not the idea. It's not a transaction tax. It is a sales tax. There has to be a sale, a change of ownership. Don't call it the Robin Hood tax. Limbaugh and Hannity will go wild, robbing from the rich to give to the poor. This means anybody with any property of any kind, wretched as it may be, will be arrayed against you. Don't call it a trading tax. Don't call it any of those things. Call it what it is, a Wall Street sales tax. And the other side of it is make it 1%. We need serious revenue. Wall Street has destroyed the economy. Make them pay. There's a great little cartoon. It shows the classical top hat capitalist from the Monopoly game on an anvil. He's going to get smashed by a kind of a socialist realism worker with a big, huge mallet. Make them pay 1%. Make them feel it. There's already the 0.006 tax, which supports the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is no good. And also, remember, there is this Euro-Tobin. This is going in the world. Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Austria, Belgium, Estonia, Greece, Portugal, Slovenia, Slovakia are all going with it. And it has global reach in this sense. The stocks of any corporation or the bonds that originate in Europe are subject to the tax. In other words, if you trade Deutsche Bank stocks in New York, you got to pay the European Tobin tax, the Euro Tobin. And similarly, if Paribas or Unicredito, if they do stock trades in Hong Kong, they've got to pay it. So it is a tax with a global reach. So down with the old arguments that if you do it in the United States, the transactions will flee to the rest of the world. No, they won't, because much of the rest of the world is now going in the direction of this tax. Now, this is most emphatically, we're saying no to austerity, no to cuts. I got an email from people saying, "Oh, we want to be able to run a deficit." Yeah, don't worry, you'll have a deficit. Don't worry about that. But remember, the fraud of Keynesianism is to say that the only way you get new liquidity to stimulate the economy is through a deficit, right? A federal budget deficit. In other words, they're looking at monetary stimulus through the central bank, and they're looking at fiscal stimulus through a government deficit. They have nothing to say about what the Fed should do. And above all, they have no plan for a credit stimulus. So that's what we're pushing here. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It is the March 8th edition once again, and we're here in Washington, D.C. The sequestered of Altoona have come back as the sequestered of America, and it is damaging, right? The reactionary Republican line is to mock and ridicule any specific manifestation of these almost $100 billion in cuts, to mock that. Well, here in Washington, a couple of obvious things, right? The Washington Metro estimates, the subway, the Metro here in Washington, which is always strapped for cash and which is always on the verge of breakdown because of the Republican Congresses from 1995 until 2006 refused to put any money into it. And after that, we had the Depression come along. The Washington Metro is going to fall short $10 million of revenue just because of the federal workers that are going to be furloughed that won't be going to their jobs. And they're going to lose $12 million out of their capital investment program. Now, let's also look. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities says there are 750,000 women and children who would qualify for WIC, Women, Infants, Children. That is nutrition, right? High-protein meals for expectant mothers, infants, and nursing mothers. WIC. 775,000 women and children will be turned away in the first year. So you get the idea. And we'll be highlighting real horrors, real suffering as a result of this Republican lunacy, right, which we oppose. So again, brace yourselves this week. Ryan is going to come out with his Balance the Budget in 10 Years. It's a piece of insanity. He will be attacking the entitlements, but of course Obama, the weakling and traitor, will not resist this. Remember, Obama is committed to the Simpson-Bowles goal of $4 trillion of killer cuts, or austerity cuts, of which he claims that $2.2 trillion is already done. So we have this unbelievable Orwellian situation. O'Reilly attacks Combs and says Obama has not cut anything. Combs says, oh, yes, he has. Yes, he has. And then all the Democrats, Ed Schultz and the whole MSNBC crew, line up to say, oh, no, we are good austerity ghouls, right? Obama is one of the best austerity ghouls. He's cut all this stuff. So I urge you, look for public appearances by people like Krugman, Stieglitz, Robert Reich, Wolf, Galbraith, Christine Romer, people, Laura D'Andrea Tyson, any of these economists with some kind of a public or political dimension. Confront them on two things: the Wall Street sales tax and why limit the stimulus to fiscal stimulus through a deficit, monetary stimulus. The monetary stimulus from Helicopter Ben looks great, right? The stock market goes up, 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 but it has extremely small effect on the job situation. Why limit the stimulus to fiscal and monetary? What about a credit stimulus? That's the several trillion, 2 to 3 trillion right off the bat to rebuild national infrastructure. So that's what I recommend. A mobilization to confront the economics profession with their failing and to try to mobilize them, right? Because it's not hostile. It's to try to get them going as a key part of boxing in Obama, try to box him in between the progressives in the House, some similar people like Harkin and Whitehouse and Bernie in the Senate, the economics profession, and some kind of a mass movement. Again, most obviously, on the 20th of January, go to my website, take a look, great pictures. When we brought that to the mall at Smithsonian Castle with these this huge poster, 1% Wall Street sales tax now. All right, now let's go to the other aspect of the Obama administration, the foreign policy. This does not look good. We have John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones, and we have to bear in mind the horrendous heritage of Skull and Bones, right? Prescott Bush of Skull and Bones financed Hitler, armed Hitler. Harriman, same thing. McGeorge Bundy, William Bundy, of the Bundy family, right? We know that Kerry had a Bundy roommate. They are the ones who brought you the Vietnam War. So now what is John Forbes Kerry going to do? Member of this Freemasonic death cult called Skull and Bones. And, of course, he's also a weakling, right? He's also a flip-flopper. So he's now been on this tour of, almost a dozen countries, and he's gotten beaten up. Saud el-Faisal, not Yale 66, but Princeton 66, Saud el-Faisal beat him up saying, look, we don't care whether these Syrian rebels are terrorists or not. We want to give them the most modern weapons. And the same thing from Foreign Minister Thani of Qatar or Gutter, telling him we want to arm those rebels. So that's his peer group, by the way. Those are the people that he values. So sure enough, the Obama regime is inching towards some greater adventure vis-a-vis Syria. And it goes along, of course, with Perfide Albion. They're never far away. Haig, the British Foreign Secretary, is pressing for direct arms shipments. And the only thing that stopped Haig this past week was a European Union cold feet decision saying, well, we don't want to go quite that far, right? We'd like not to be the ones who get blamed when these crazies shoot down a commercial airliner or something like this. So this does not look good. And, of course, Khatib, the executive from Royal Dutch Shell, telling Kerry that the U.S. aid is not enough. He wants more. Now, a smart way to do this is to say, you American taxpayer, you American in general, man in the street, you little people of America, you're getting slammed with sequester, and the terrorist controller Khatib of Royal Dutch Shell wants more money for his Al-Qaeda al-Nusra gang, they're not happy with the service, right? It's not enough. Make it snappy. Bring on the money because they want those Stingers and those other missiles. So remember now, this is very real. The tendency of the second-term president is to go wild, right? Clinton lost his way into Bosnia. He didn't pay a very heavy price. But LBJ, his second term, in effect, right, when he was reelected or elected, but in the second term, that's when the Vietnam escalation occurred, 65, 66, and so on down the line. So Obama is really in danger of this stuff if he doesn't turn back. And it looks like the influence of Kerry has been what you'd expect from a skull and bones adept. Now, the Syrian rebels have shown what they're made of. The Syrian rebels have kidnapped and are holding as hostage a whole bunch of United Nations observers. There's a whole bunch of Filipinos working for the United Nations from the Philippines, working for the United Nations in Syria. The death squads, the killers, Nusra, these people have taken them hostage, and they're holding them. And it's always interesting to see the media, right, National Public Radio this morning, bending over backwards to treat them with kid gloves. It's probably some local commander who's gone off the reservation and he doesn't know what he's doing, and so forth. And, of course, Anhar Kochneva, friend of the broadcast, Anhar Kochneva, also continues to be held by these death squads. More about that in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It's the 8th of March, and we're looking at Kerry's trip around Europe and the Middle East in particular, and it is a disaster. It's got skull and bones written all over it, right? Kowtowing to these reactionary, feudal monarchs, who, of course, his friends, right? The kind of people that he likes, right? Saud al-Faisal, the Thanis, bad news. So it was a trip through about a dozen countries. Now, already by Wednesday, Washington Post headline: Syria rebels may get direct U.S. aid. Help would not include weapons, but it would include armored vehicles, tanks. A tank without a gun, you provide the gun or the missile launcher. You get the idea. A growing hysteria, too, about Syria, I think, from the ruling circles. Assad, on the other hand, self-assured, interview with the London Times last week, another self-assured interview. The Russian foreign ministry says they see Assad digging in for the long haul. So the West is stuck with terrorists. Now, I want to make another special plea. Anhar Kochneva, Ukrainian journalist working in Damascus and Homs and Aleppo, kidnapped last October. Kochneva. Anhar Kochneva, kidnapped by the death squads, being held by them. Some people, and I hope a number in our audience, sent communications to the State Department back during the Hillary Clinton era. It's time to do that again now because we're now in the John Kerry era. And if you did it during the Sarkozy regime, now we have Fabius. Time to send it in again. And that guy, Sant'Agata at the Farnesina, and the German foreign ministry with Westerwelle. All of these characters need to hear that it's not just the 20 Filipinos that are being held, but it's also a group of international journalists, of which we're concerned in particular about Anhar Kochneva. So get the heat. The bureaucratic blowtorch goes on the foreign ministries of the main NATO countries that are responsible for this, and others as you think possible. If your congressman or senator is prominent on the foreign relations or international affairs committees, then raise that issue with them, because nothing points up the real essence of these death squads, nothing more than the fact that they take international hostages, and that makes them terrorists. And people, this is the medium to long-term thing, is the Watergate potential for this is that public officials like Kerry or Susan Rice or Hillary Clinton, who insist systematically, stubbornly, incorrigibly, they want to support these terrorists, and nothing changes their view. Not when their own department says Nusra is Al-Qaeda, not when they take these UN monitors as hostages. They're setting themselves up for prosecution later on, because that's exactly giving aid and comfort, material assistance, I think they call it, to terrorists. And that will interrupt many a march towards the White House that might now seem to be impossible to hold back. It can happen. Vitaly Churkin, the Russian representative at the UN, says somebody wants this crisis to explode and escalate. And it seems to me you have to figure that's Mr. Skull and Bones. That's the new guy at the State Department. Now, let's turn back to U.S. domestic, at least for a little while. We're looking at Michigan, and we are now facing the imminent deployment of a little Hitler. And I urge people, let's call it that, right? This is Governor Snyder of Michigan and his emergency manager law. Emergency manager is far too nice. This is a little Hitler law. This is to put the city of Detroit under the gun, under the absolute diktat of a little fascist dictator, a little Hitler. Let's call it what it is. And we can see that the left liberals have a hard time opposing this, because the left liberals, especially now in the age of Obama, they now say, well, of course, the city of Detroit, they've really got to crack down on those unions. Those unions are really sucking the lifeblood out of the city, and isn't it time to renegotiate those contracts and so forth? So this is not just the sort of National Public Radio right-thinking center gawk or center-left oligarch view, but it's even the people at, some of them at least at MSNBC, who are now saying, well, maybe this is the only way to go. And the answer is no. So we are here to fight this, right? So we're fighting Snyder, and we're fighting the emergency manager law, and it is not the case that Detroit needs to be put under the dictatorship of one of Snyder's cronies, right? And you know how it works, that they come in and they kick out the mayor, they kick out the city council. The city council of Detroit has just voted to say no, no to the emergency manager. But it's coming. It's probably going to be next week. So we got to be ready for this. And when it happens, it's time to go on Twitter and denounce this. This is the little Hitler law. That's what it amounts to. And this is a fascist coup, step by step, piece by piece. It's a creeping coup. And, of course, the top creep is Snyder. And, again, what was the prelude to Hitler's seizure of power, January 1933? It's the seizure of power by von Papen and company in Prussia, kicking out the social democratic government that had been minority government, caretaker government that had been ruling in Prussia, and putting in in this case, an intendant, right, a bankruptcy administrator. So time to mobilize about that. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Come back to World Crisis Radio. So will there be a little Hitler running Detroit, Michigan? What a tragedy. What What a shame for the United States. This is a worldwide story. And, of course, we'll have Reverend Pinckney from Benton Harbor and other people that are involved in this struggle as the weeks go by. The timetable seems to be that Detroit had until March 11th to request a hearing from His Majesty Snyder to plead its case about why it doesn't need an emergency manager. That is what the Detroit City Council has already voted. If a hearing is requested, it will take place on March 12th. If it is not requested, if there's no hearing, the governor can be expected to appoint an austerity manager soon after, and a final decision on who that will be has not been made. Maybe they'll get Martin Bormann. He might be available for that job. You get the idea. So that essentially then puts the city of Detroit under an austerity dictatorship. No mayor, no city council, no Republican form of government. The 14th Amendment comes into play, right? If you're depriving people of life, liberty, property without due process of law. And remember, all of this is under the emergency manager law, which was voted down, right? Public Act 4 was struck down by Michigan voters last November as a ballot proposal, and then Snyder turned around and passed a new one, Public Act 436. This, by the way, this is why you need the voting rights oversight, because if you allow racist states, in this case a fascist state, to come up with these things, you can strike them down either through the courts or through referenda, and they come up with new ones. The only way to prevent this would be a nationwide law saying you can't have an emergency manager law unless you get it approved by the Department of Justice in advance, and then do everything possible to make it impossible for them to get that approved. So that we're going to be sticking with that story. Now, on the internal front, we are told that the Republicans are going to have a hard time winning the Senate. The Republicans need 6 seats. There are 5 toss-ups. I don't know whether this includes Levin of Michigan, who says he's quitting now. Only one of them seems to be in play. That would be West Virginia. Now, our new department, when evil fights evil, the good may benefit. Little Rand Paul, the nepotist demagogue, is out there filibustering. And as I say, when evil fights evil, good may result. But that is not a reason to join evil. It's another reason to assert the good as against the evil versus evil that's going on. So Little Rand had his filibuster, joined by Cruz, joined by some others. They're using the obvious, it's a real abuse, right, that Obama might want to kill somebody inside the country using a drone in the continental United States against some kind of citizen or other person. And Holder has now said, finally, without so much double talk, no, the president does not have this right. The term for Little Rand that might be applicable is stealth kook, not a kook on the dimensions of the father Ron Paul, but a disguised kook, a stealth kook. McCain says Paul and Cruz are wacko birds. Well, whenever we see reactionaries fighting reactionaries, right? It's not just Little Rand fighting Obama and Holder, but McCain fighting Paul and Cruz. Wonderful, bring it on. Evil fights evil, and the good may benefit. The reactionaries are split. The neocons, in particular, are freaking about the fact of this filibuster that Ron Wyden of Oregon joined in, and so forth. And one of the things that is beneficial, there's an anti-CIA mood on Capitol Hill. Now, don't expect certain Brand X websites to tell you about an anti-CIA mood going on, right? Don't expect LaRouche PAC or something like this to tell you about an anti-CIA mood. You'll never hear about it there. But there is, right? And there will be some effort to rein in some of the worst excesses. All right. Now let's switch abroad. The papal conclave begins on the 12th of March. You know the general guideline here. No Anglophone pope. Nobody from an English-speaking country. Nobody from U.S., Canada, including French Canada, I'm afraid, because they haven't been able to maintain themselves. Nobody from U.S., from Canada, from Britain, from any English-speaking country in Africa. Nobody from Nigeria, from Ghana, from South Africa, from Australia, from New Zealand. No, no, no. No echelon pope. And again, we don't want President O'Malley in 2016 getting congratulations from Pope O'Malley. So the main point is the Pope and the empire must remain separate. This is the main teaching of Dante in the Divine Comedy, in De Monarchia, and elsewhere. This is golden, timeless wisdom. And we're told that what's going on behind the scenes is something like this. The Italians of the Curia are interested in getting the Pope elected fast. They have candidates set up. They would like the conclave to begin immediately. The principal opposition is said to come from the U.S. delegation. 10 to 12 U.S. cardinals or cardinals from North America thought to be in the U.S. or Anglo-American orbit. And there is now intelligence warfare going on in the background. As I said before, Cardinal Keith O'Brien of Scotland, the senior cardinal of the United Kingdom, ousted because of his hanky-panky with other priests. That would seem to be a torpedo sent by the Curia. The Italians look like they would be happy with somebody like Leonardo Sandri of Argentina. I think that would be fine. So a Francophone African, okay. A Latin American, okay. An Italian, okay. But the big thing is not somebody from the Anglo-American Empire. And the point of this is you want a papacy that will be able to oppose the empire in the two main things. One is fight genocidal austerity. It violates the social doctrine of the church. It violates the social gospel. It violates the principle of charity. Faith, hope, and charity, and the greatest of these is charity. The IMF, the European Central Bank, the European Commission, the Federal Reserve, and all the rest of it, Wall Street, the City of London, they violate Christian charity. They have to be fought. This is principle. And on war, you've got to oppose the constant racist, Islamophobic stuff that's going on. You got to have an ecumenical principle going. You got to be looking for that common ground of Muslim social solidarity, Confucian benevolence, and Christian charity, which could lead the world out of the crisis. So you got to be anti-war. You've got to be anti-austerity. And the stuff about individual sexual morality should be pushed into the background. They'll always tell you the magisterium remains the same over millennia, but the emphasis within it changes. So it's time to de-emphasize the stuff about personal behavior in the sexual or reproductive sphere, stuff that came to the fore, after all, under Mussolini, Franco, Pétain, Salazar, and the rest of them, and now switch back to something that looks more like Paul VI than Populorum Progressio. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So lots and lots of mud being slung. There is this group called SNAP. It is the Society of People who have been abused, right? The Survivors Network of those abused by priests, and they have their list of the dirty dozen cardinals. You can find this on the internet. The dirty dozen seem to include many of the papabili that have been at least publicly identified. Normally with a group like this, you got to figure they're maneuvered by somebody, right? They're being used as a tool of some faction or other, but they mainly seem to attack the principal Anglo-American faction people, plus a certain number of people in the Curia, but they go after Cardinal from Canada, Ghana, Australia, United States. I think it hits them a bit harder, although it also hits a couple of people from the Curia and some from Latin America. Anyway, watch out for this stuff. There are also all kinds of leaks coming out in the Italian press, which, well, if you want to follow those, tune in to Tarpley.net and especially Webster G. Tarpley Twitter. So let's now go on to Italy. The news, Goldman Sachs endorses Beppe Grillo. This is amazing. Goldman Sachs loves Grillo. If you had any doubts, they should be gone. Goldman Sachs says Grillo is actually a good thing. Now, it's not just Goldman Sachs alone. The week before, Mediobanca, the heritage of the infamous Enrico Cuccia, the great tradition, Mattioli of the Banca Commerciale Italiana, then Enrico Cuccia of Mediobanca, and now Goldman Sachs. These are bankers who run anarchists. Remember, the cult of Apollo runs the cult of Dionysios. And with Beppe Grillo, you have the cult of Dionysios. You got to scratch behind that, you'll find the cult of Apollo. Cult of Apollo means Bilderberg, Aspen, Harvard, and the American Chamber of Commerce in Italy with all those multinationals. The cult of Apollo runs the cult of Dionysios. That is the lesson of the ancient world. It does not change. Now, this is Jim Allen. This is the guy who invented the term the pigs. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And what Jim Allen is doing is he says, I love Grillo, welcome Grillo, we think he's great. At the same time, he's dumping Italian treasury bonds, and he's gearing up to short those bonds and even more to attack them with credit default swaps. And now we see the whole operation. Fitch has just come in and degraded Italy to BBB+. So Italy bonds are headed for junk status thanks to Fitch and thanks to Beppe Grillo. He made it possible. Also, Mario Draghi of the European Central Bank, right, the unspeakable one, his commitment not to support, indeed to attack Italian government bonds was key in that monstrous coup d'etat of November 2011 that put Monti and his austerity technocrats into power for 15 months of absolute economic destruction. The love affair between Grillo and the Anglo-American news media continues. Time magazine, big interview with Grillo. And in the course of this, Grillo said, if we, the five-star movement of Grillo, if we should fail, there will be violence in the streets. In other words, Grillo's threat of blackmail is, if you don't support me and give me what I want, then there's going to be violence in the streets. Not, of course, that Grillo would do it, but that's just the way it is. Now, I would urge you, go back and compare the worldwide pattern of media slanders against Alexis Tsipras and Syriza in the summer of last year with the honeymoon that Grillo is getting from Time magazine, from Huffington Post. We also noticed that LaRouche is flirting with Grillo. It's very interesting because LaRouche's website in Italy has long referred to the Grillo, the Grillini as zombies, and the decrescita, the atrophy or degrowth. But that's being overridden in the interests of the CIA commitment to Grillo. So disinformation from that source once again. There was in the past week in Italy the suicide of a top official of Monte dei Paschi di Siena, right, that bank from the 1470s, which has now blown up. It's thought that this suicide, plus some tapes or other material going around, is going to be very dangerous for the PD, the Social Democrats, the neo-communists, Bersani, and Berlusconi has been hit by another verdict from these highly politicized investigating judges. So the witch hunt against Berlusconi goes on. The possible scandal material against the Social Democrats increases. So the whole pattern is to give more power to Grillo. Now, we've also had the first meeting of Grillo's parliamentary groups, right, the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate, and I'm afraid these people are pathetic novices, right? They're at the level of come out and say, hi, I'm Giuseppe, and I'm a vegetarian from Novara, and I've been leaving the Roman Catholic Church and God knows what. So we're at the level practically of a high school yearbook in terms of naivete. But remember, as Robert Walpole said, every person has his price. And I'm sure that some of these grillini will find that when it comes to electing the president of the Republic in not that many weeks, there will be people willing to pay quite a price for those votes. Bersani had said he wanted to scout the grillini, and we have the petition of Viola Tesi, who wants to have an ice cream shop. She wants a coalition government of Grillo with the PD, with the Bersani Social Democrats. The other thing that comes to the fore, the extremely oppressive internal party dictatorship by Grillo. This is now degrading. This is a scandal. You can't give an interview. Grillo declared that none of the newly elected senators and representatives are allowed to give their own interviews to the mass media. They're not allowed to go on television. In other words, it's a mass movement, if you will, that flees from any debate. No contradictions allowed. Nothing that might shake the belief structure of these pathetic members of parliament that he's got. So this is a bunch of sheep, frankly, looking for direction. And up to now, that's been coming from Grillo and, of course, Casaleggio. Casaleggio, often called Casa Loggia, Loggia meaning the lodge, as in P2 Lodge, or maybe in this case it's the P3 Lodge. But coming from this utopian world of information science at Olivetti and Pirelli and other Italian private companies, this is a very, very toxic mixture. So the only hope here is that between the pathos of these new members of parliament and the backlash against the internal party dictatorship, the really degrading, embarrassing, humiliating things that Grillo does to his, not even rank and file, but his parliamentary factions, that some early split will occur that will break up this movement because it does not have cohesion. And that, I think, is the story. And whether there's going to be a government soon, because the goal of this is supposed to be to form a government, Grillo has now rejected all possible alternatives to form a government. The alternative would be a single-party government of the PD, tolerated from people on the outside just to be a caretaker, and let Grillo fall apart. And we'll see you next week, maybe after the conclave and after Ryan delivers his new genocidal austerity budget. So we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio.